Hey everybody, welcome back to an Econ 1B video. Today I'm going to talk about this week's participation activity, which looks at firm costs in a new way. This week we've been talking about perfect competition, taking firm costs and now applying them to the marketplace. So we've been talking about how profit is a function of revenue minus costs, and we spent all last week talking about fixed costs and variable costs and total costs, and those costs and average and even marginal cost. Now we're talking about revenue. We've talked about average revenue and actually more importantly, marginal revenue. And the big idea we got to is that firms are going to want to produce where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost and in perfect competition, only in perfect competition, but in perfect competition, marginal revenue is equal to price. And so today we are going to graph a average total cost, average variable cost, and marginal cost curve for a firm, indicated by a table on the assignment. And then we're going to talk about what a firm would do in perfect competition if the price was $12 and if the price was $25. And for our purposes, we're going to assume that this business is a restaurant, because I think it's going to help us really understand how fixed costs and variable costs are different. And we're going to make use of the pandemic to help us walk through that. So thank you, pandemic. It's not so bad after all. You're a great example of firms shutting down versus exiting the market. And all this stuff is stuff we're going to wrap up. We haven't talked about fully. It's in the chapter. It's in the slides. We haven't talked about it fully in class yet because it's not Friday yet. And on Friday, we will talk about that. So first of all, I'm going to just take the numbers from the assignment and build out my cost curves. So the assignment gives you quantities from 0 to 5, variable cost, total cost, marginal cost, average variable cost, and average total cost. So today, you don't have to calculate anything. You just have to graph. So let's go ahead and do that. Remember that it's going to be in quantity and cost or price space. And so I start using just a dollar sign for our purposes when we do these graphs, because now it's not just price, it's also cost. But those things are both money, and so it works out to graph them together. As I said, we're going to go from a quantity of 0 to a quantity of 5. And I'm going to try and graph this really well. We're only going to graph average variable cost, average total cost, and marginal cost. And so we only need to go up to average total cost tops out at $38. So let's say this is 40 up here, which would make this 20, and this would be 10, this would be 30, and let's divide that out again. There's 5, 15, 25, and 35. And that should give us some stuff. And I'm going to continue to use colored pens when I do this because I think it helps to really see the difference between the different curves and identify what's going on. I just dropped a bunch of pens, so that's going to help. All right, so we've got our average total cost curve is going to go from $38, about right here, to $24, so that's going to be about right here, to $20 at a quantity of 3, $20 again at a quantity of 4, and then $22 at a quantity of 5. So it's going to look something like this. So far, so good. It doesn't matter what order you graph them in. I just like to do it sometimes this way. Sometimes I do marginal cost first. Doesn't matter. Average variable cost starts out at $8 for the first unit. So I'll put that right there. And then it goes to $9. And then it goes up to $10. And then it goes to $12.50. And then it goes up to $16. So it's not much of a smile. It's more just a upward slope. And then finally marginal cost. And again, It's not super important to me whether you graph marginal cost on the space between 1 and 0 or the space between 1 and 2, or whether you do it on 1. Do what makes sense to you and do what's comfortable with you. The book makes a big deal about making sure that you put marginal cost on the margin in the space in between the iterations. I don't think it matters that much, so do what works for you. I'm going to go ahead and do it in between on this one. So in between 0 and 1, we have marginal cost of 8. Then we have 2, the marginal cost of 10. Then we have the marginal cost of 12. Then we have a marginal cost of 40. Or sorry, of 20. And that's actually, it's kind of helpful here because you can see if this is 20 for a quantity of 3, 20 for a quantity of 4, here it's 20 for the marginal unit, that 4th unit. That's the marginal cost of that 4th unit. And then the marginal cost of that 5th unit is $30. So I'll put that right there. So it's going to kind of go like that. So this is a little bit giving away the next part, but remember, in perfect competition, only in perfect competition, marginal revenue is equal to price. So the price is given by the market, and because in perfect competition we assume many buyers and sellers, everyone's a price taker, so we just have to accept whatever price is given. So assuming perfect competition, what will happen in the short run if the price is $12? So I can go ahead and take my red pen and do my marginal revenue curve. At $12, I'm going to say it's right here. And you can also use your table to help you make sure where you're supposed to be. So I know that my marginal cost curve is $12 at quantity of 3, so I'm going to be right there. And that average variable cost hits $12.50 at quantity of 4, which makes sense right there. So it's just going to go right through that as a straight line. Cool. Now, this is the exciting part. Remember, we said that firms are going to produce where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, and that they won't have an incentive to produce anything else. So we can find where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost right here, right? And this is where it gets a little bit tricky depending on how you graph your marginal cost curve. So you could say, oh, well, that's 2.5 units. It's 3, right? That's that 3rd unit has that marginal cost of 12. But generally the idea here is that at a price of $12, this firm is going to choose to produce that quantity of 3 units. Sound good? So far it makes sense? That's the big giveaway at the end of this chapter, is that the marginal cost curve is actually the firm's supply curve, each individual firm's supply curve, because it tells us how much they're going to produce. If marginal revenue goes up, they produce more. If price goes down, they produce fewer. What? I know, it's exciting. The next part of this question and the next question is confusing because we haven't finished it yet. I'm asking you what happens in the short run and what happens in the long run. And to talk about that, we need to talk about this idea of sunk costs. So if you remember, let's see, I'll pull it up here. The meme I shared with you all at the beginning of this section when we started talking about costs and that kind of thing. There's a Futurama meme where, let me pull it up. Fry says, "Not sure if I should back out now or stay because I've already invested so much, too much time already." Economists consider things that you've already invested and you can't get back sunk, meaning they don't matter. So, for example, let's say I bought a plane ticket to go to Europe in the summer. Then all of a sudden the pandemic happens, no one can travel. There's nothing I can do to get the money for the ticket back. It's sunk. I already spent it. If I do get money back from the airlines, it feels like new money, right? If you got a refund from something you already spent money on, it doesn't feel like you got that money back. Psychologically, we treat it like new money. And economists think of that as being because once you've spent it, it's sunk. What does that have to do with this graph? Well, remember, in the short run, firms cannot change their fixed costs. So if we have a restaurant, we have paid for insurance for the year, we have a yearly lease for our restaurant space, we have some big kitchen equipment that we bought. Those are all fixed costs. Those stay the same no matter what we do. We have variable costs too, right? We have food we have to buy, we have to pay for our workers, maybe we have utilities. Those increase and decrease, they can be changed in the short run. So our variable costs change in the short run, but our fixed costs don't. If in the short run we aren't making enough money, we can shut down. And we saw that with the pandemic, right? The pandemic meant restaurants and lots of businesses shut down in the short run. They didn't go out of business, they just stopped producing. And so what that would mean is, it would mean stop having to pay those variable costs. However, they still had to pay the fixed costs, right? They were still paying rent on the restaurant space, they were still paying their insurance, but there was nothing they could do about it. And so a rational economist says, if you can't do anything about it, don't worry about it. That means, what does that mean? That means that if we're looking at the marginal revenue and the marginal cost curve and trying to decide whether this firm should stay in business in the short run, we're going to only think about variable costs. So if we look at where this firm is producing, marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost at a quantity of 3, and they are covering their variable costs, right? They aren't able to cover their average total cost. So if you go back to the table for the assignment and you look at that quantity of 3, you can see marginal cost is $12, average variable cost is $10, average total cost is $20. So that means if we were to work it out all together, at a quantity of 3, they are selling 3 times $12, oops, which would be $36 in revenue, but their total cost is $60. Oops. Because at a quantity of 3, average total cost is $20 times 3. Right? Or total cost on the table is 3. So they're taking losses, right? In the long run, the firm can do something about this. They can go out of business. But in the short run, they can't do anything about their fixed costs, right? They can't worry about they can't end their lease or something like that. So they're just going to look at, in the short run, they're going to compare their revenue to their average variable cost curve. And you can do that by looking at the table and saying, okay, well, at a quantity of 3, total variable cost is actually only $30. And we can look at it right here and see, at a quantity of 3, marginal revenue and marginal cost cross each other above average variable cost. That's what's known as the shutdown rule. If marginal revenue is greater than average variable cost at that point, they stay in business. And we would, right? If we have a restaurant and we can't get out of our lease, we can't do anything about this additional total cost, we can't do anything about the fixed costs associated with production, we would stay in business because we're still making $36, and that covers our labor, it covers our materials, and we get $6 to try and put towards the money we owe. In the long run, however, when we can change our total cost, when we can change our fixed cost, we're going to look at this and say, no, we need to get out of business. We need to exit the market. So at a price of $12, marginal cost and average and marginal revenue are equal at a quantity of 3. At a quantity of 3, marginal revenue is above average variable cost. So a firm will stay in business in the short run. However, marginal revenue is also below average total cost. And so in the long run, they'll exit because they'll say, hey, we're losing money. And yeah, we can pay for labor. And yeah, we can pay our bills. We can pay our electricity bill. We can pay our materials. We can pay the wages of our workers. But we can't cover our rent. And we need to leave as soon as we can in that long run. Does that make sense, kind of? If it doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. We're going to talk about it in class on Friday together, and I'll make another video covering it, okay? What about the next question? The next question says, well, that's all fine and well, that $12 price, but what if the price is actually not $12, but $25? If the price is $25, now we have a new marginal revenue curve for number 2. And now we're going to see our firm produce where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. And it's in between 4 and 5, right? So we'll just bring that down. And say that they would still produce something. Maybe they'd produce 4 units. Maybe they probably wouldn't produce 5 units. They'd produce that 4th unit though, right? So in perfect competition, marginal revenue is equal to price. Firms produce at marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. So in the short run, we would say that the firm would produce that quantity of 4. Now, when we ask ourselves the same short run, long run equilibrium question, it's the same thing. In the short run, we want to consider the average variable cost curve. So in the short run, would the firm produce? The firm will produce if marginal revenue is greater than average variable cost. And we can see a price of $25, marginal revenue is greater than average variable cost by a lot. So the firm will stay in business in the short run. They will not shut down. In the long run, we want to consider total costs, fixed costs and variable costs. So in the long run, let me check and make sure you guys can see this on the video. Ooh, almost out of space. In the long run, we want to compare marginal revenue to average total cost. At $12, we were better than we were beating average variable cost, right? We were covering our variable costs, but we couldn't cover our total costs. Now, at a price of $25, we are higher than our average variable cost curve and higher than our average total cost curve. So we would not exit the market. We would stay in business in the long run. Does that kind of make sense? Because at a price of $25, we can sell 4 units for $25 each, and those 4 units are going to cost us $80. So if we do the quick math on it, we could see that, which pen should I use, right? 4 times a price of $25 gives us a revenue of $100. And then our total cost at 4 units is $80. So we'd be making $20 of profit. Pretty cool, right? So we'd stay in business. Of course we'd stay in business. The next part, the last part of question 2 is tricky. It asks what we would do in the long run, or what the long run equilibrium price is. And that has to do with this idea that there, in the long run, shouldn't be economic rents, or there shouldn't be economic profit. And this gets back to why we talked about economic profit and accounting profit, because we do want to allow for accounting profit, but in the long run equilibrium and perfect competition, we actually assume 0 economic profit. And that's something that's kind of a hard concept to grasp, and that's why we talk about implicit costs and explicit costs early on, so you can kind of get used to it. So what we're going to find is at the end of this chapter, markets are going to be in equilibrium when price is equal to average total cost and marginal cost. That's the long run equilibrium. And that's because if prices are too high, firms are going to say, holy smokes, that's amazing. I should enter that market, right? And eat away at the profits. If prices are too low, firms are going to say, holy smokes, I can't stay in business and exit the market. And so it's only when prices are perfectly equal to marginal cost, average total cost, and marginal revenue, when they're all the same, that's when we're in long run equilibrium, when there's no incentive to increase or decrease production. And I know that's a super weird concept. A lot of people have a hard time grasping it. We'll talk about it more on Friday, but that's how you get through this whole thing. And so that's what this whole assignment is looking at. So once you've got the graphs, which is a lot, right? Then we add in this idea of marginal revenue and how that determines what we produce, right? And then the next layer, the next level is to say, hey, what happens given that that's the price, that's the marginal revenue, and what does that mean for the firm? And so we take our costs, we add in marginal revenue, and then we determine in the short run, can this firm cover their variable costs? And if they can, they stay in business. If they can't, they shut down. In the long run, can this firm cover all of their costs? And if they can, they stay in business. If they can't, they exit the market. They break their lease, or they don't renew their lease with their restaurant or their office space, or they sell off all their factory equipment. They do things that you can do in the long run that you can't do in the short run. If prices are too high, more firms enter and prices go down. If prices are too low, firms exit and prices go up. And that's the component that comes from market forces of supply and demand. If this doesn't make sense, that's okay. It's a lot. This is a really big, heavy chapter. We're going to talk about it more. We're going to talk about it on Friday. We'll have a homework assignment to practice it. And what I will do is I'll post some materials to help you kind of get at it. We'll post some more videos to talk about it, and hopefully that helps. So that's participation activity for talking about perfect competition. Let me know what questions you have, and I will see you all next time.